about Young Dolph, one of my favorite rappers, R.I.P. Dolph, is that if you listen to especially the song by Young Dolph, it's called Sunshine, and it's kind of like saying, we want to, as a nation, get over COVID and go back out again and enjoy life again. And in the song, Young Dolph says two things. He first of all says that his Lambo's blue and his president's Trump. And the other thing he says, if you listen to the song, it's kind of in the hook. He said Trump said we're going to go to war. Trump said we're going to go to war. So I went out and bought 2 Army trucks. And so if you listen to that, he may have not glowingly came out and endorsed Trump and said, I'm down with Trump. But in that song, you can tell that he is somewhat supportive. And there were other rappers, other people.
Because just imagine if he came out with a full-throated endorsement, that might sink his career.
Yeah, but if you listen to that song, he was very pro-Trump. And he said, I went out and bought 2 Army trucks because he said Trump said we're going to go to war.
Let me tell you, a lot of black men are closet Trump supporters.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I cannot tell you how many people in my circle and on my social media that I saw so many African American men supporting Trump and stuff, and it was just amazing. And just talking to some of my friends and stuff, just the support as it grew, it was amazing.
Mm-hmm. And I feel a lot of black men are hesitant just because there's that lingering cloud over the Republican Party of we're racist, because they don't get to speak to a gentleman like you. They have no idea you listen to Young Dolph.
Well, you got to think of it this way, okay? 2 things. First of all, the Republican Party started as an anti-slavery party. Now, let's fast forward to more recent history, okay? Dwight D. Eisenhower, before JFK, sent troops. If you remember, before JFK sent troops down to Alabama or federalized the National Guard, before JFK did any of that, President Dwight D. Eisenhower, a Republican, whenever Little Rock, the court decision came down that Little Rock had to integrate, President Eisenhower sent and federalized troops to let the Little Rock 8 into the school. And he was a Republican, and that was before Kennedy.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Republican.
The Little Rock 8, when they were integrating the Little Rock public schools,
yep,
it was Eisenhower who took a stand and said, I will federalize the troops.
You have a very important voice because the people need to hear what you're saying as a Republican.
Well, you know what, though? I want them to hear me more than just Republican. I want them to hear me as somebody who I have lived a rich life in my experiences. And I literally, if I told you my whole story, I have been exposed to just different cultures and different peoples, and I'm a person like, listen, even if I don't totally agree, maybe some of what you said, you know what, maybe you can change my mind a little bit. And I'm open to that because that's what growth is. Growth is being able to say, look, core values, no, I'm going to stand and I'm not going to compromise. But you know what? Maybe, hey, make the case. Milton Friedman, okay? Milton Friedman, libertarian, staunch libertarian, argued for a negative income tax. Now, some people would call that a universal basic income. It wasn't a UBI because you had to pay taxes, but what Friedman argued for was a negative income tax. When was this? This was in the 70s and 80s. He produced a series on PBS called Free to Choose.
Wow.
And what he said was this: you set an amount of income tax. And how it would work, you set an amount of income tax. Back then, he was talking about $3,000 or $4,000, and that was way back then. And if you made less than that, you would get that in a rebate at the end of the year. Okay, but the other side to it, to make it fair and to balance it, was that amount of income was non-taxable. You could make up to that amount of income; it was non-taxable. But if you made less than that amount of money, it was called, and you filed a tax return, you would get a rebate from the government. He was a libertarian.
So not a socialist, not a far-right lunatic.
Socialism, no, heck no, I'm not a socialist.
Yeah.
But I'm a practical person that says, sometimes if we want to get somewhere, sometimes we got to understand we may not be able to jump from A to Q. We might have to go from A to E, you know? And so I think what we got to understand is let's be conservative. Let's push for our values, but let's also understand sometimes to get to where you want to go, you may not be able to just totally go to that.
I totally agree. I think the gap or what's missing with that, with the I'm not going to say it's, well, a social welfare net in a sense, is that personal responsibility may be lacking after some time.
Yeah.
So the two, it has to be, the two has to run together. You can get assistance from the government, right? But on a personal level, you do have to learn to pull yourself up out of the bootstrap. Two things can be true.
Right. Two things can be true, and they're both true. But here's the deal.
Yeah.
Our friends on the left, now, we want to argue with them about a lot of stuff, but they do have a point sometimes on federal, or I'm not federal, but commercial welfare and business welfare. There are times that they do have a point on some of the things that we give money to private companies and to focus groups and all that. And so I think there's some truth to that. But I'll go one step further. There was a housing project in the 60s and 70s in Chicago called Pruitt-Igoe. Are you familiar with it?
No.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was in St. Louis. Cabrini Greens was in Chicago.
Yes.
Cabrini Greens was most of the people were good.
I've heard of Cabrini. I've heard of it. Yeah.
There were people that were trapped there. Good people that were trapped there. It was crime infested. It was rodent infested. There was times their heat didn't work in the middle of a Chicago winter. Things were falling apart. The elevators didn't work. Now listen. Do you know what the government was spending between the housing subsidy, healthcare, and food assistance? Sort of like the SNAP program we have now, food stamps, if you would. They were spending on average $82,000 a year per resident. Do you know what that makes in 2024, 2023, or 2024 money?
150.
No, 230,000. So here's my question.
Per person? Why don't they just give them the $230,000?
Yes. What if you just gave half of it to people and said, here's what we're going to do. Here's, by virtue of you being a legal U.S. citizen, you have to be a citizen, and you have to be legal or legally here. We're going to give you an amount of money a year, but there's no more HUD. There's no more SNAP. This is to cover your basic needs, because do you know how many billions we're wasting? Billions we're wasting on just the programs themselves that don't even get to people.
I can imagine.
Now listen, I don't believe that should be forever and ever. I think it could be a step. Yeah. It could be a stepping stone. But here's my deal. If we could save money and help empower people and say, listen, we're giving you this money, but you've got to take care of yourself. You have to empower yourself with it. We would save billions in all these programs, because what's the other solution? Are we just going to overnight just do away with them all? That would throw things.
Or overnight we can't change culture and personal habit.
And I think government assistance should be time limited. Unless you are fully disabled, it should be time limited.
Yes.
You get help for so long.
You can't suck off the government's teat forever.
And then it has to be a number of years before you can apply again. And again, if we empower people, and let me give you one example. Do you know there's people that live in public housing and are getting food assistance that if they start working, if they actually start trying to get off the government payroll, they literally cut their benefits and they discourage them. Being a conservative means we encourage limited government, absolutely. But where the government for right now is involved, what it should be doing is encouraging people to empower themselves. But here's what they'll do. You start working too much, we're cutting your food assistance, and and if there's a man in the home,
he's got to go.
He's got to go, or you got to go. I believe we should be encouraging people and empowering them. And guess what? If we do that, a lot of this stuff will resolve itself.
I think so.
But I think it's like the pastor said there too. There's got to be a move of God, and we as people have got to get back to where we get ourselves. We got to check ourselves first.
Yeah, no, it does start with the individual. And to your point, if the government would say, hey, we're going to give you this amount of money, but we're going to remove all these other government services, I agree with that. But there are going to be the people who would take that money and squander it. That's the fear.
Well, here's the question. They're doing it already. What happens? We remember when people used to get food stamps, they were actually almost like a bill. They were a tangible instrument, right? Mm-hmm. And they said, if we go to the card, we'll stop fraud. We will stop fraud. Guess what people do now? They still sell the money at 50 cents on the dollar. They just use a card to do it.
Yep.
Here's the thing. I believe this. There comes a point when you say to folks, we are going to help you. We're going to work through this, and we're going to come up with a plan. But at the end of the day, you're responsible. And you know what? Here's the other question. In a way, isn't it almost a little bit degrading to say Well, because they receive assistance, they can't take care of themselves. Here's the thing. And those programs, we spend more on the bureaucracy and the program than we do on the actual service.
Doge,
There's a problem.
well, hopefully Doge can come take a look at this and maybe have a novel idea on how to handle it. Maybe implement some of what you're saying.
Yeah. Listen, listen. I'm not for people having to be on government programs. But I believe we should help those who have been on them we should help them to move forward and to move forward and move on.
Yeah, absolutely.